Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to Mountain Cloud, another Thursday night. 11/11 is actually our official anniversary. That's to say that in 2010, around about this time, Will Brennan, assistant teacher Will Brennan, sort of invited me to come to Mountain Cloud and start teaching there. And it wasn't, we were reflecting, we were trying to have an anniversary like a year on, and we weren't exactly sure when, the first time was that I sort of gave a formal, talk or whatever at Mountain Cloud, but we thought it was around about 11/11. So we decided that was our anniversary. And of course, it's a very, it's a day for reflection in many ways, because across the world, so very many young men died, and during the First World War, which ended, so they say, at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918. And certainly, nations like the UK and France and Germany and Belgium and Holland and so on were just utterly devastated by that war. And we remember all veterans and all the many, many soldiers, who willingly or unwillingly, many cases unwillingly, went off to war and didn't come home. And all their family members and friends who lost them, the just endless, seemingly endless legacy of trauma that humans have created for themselves and passed on again and again. And fortunately, interventions exist, practices exist that are trying to undo, unbind, detoxify our systems, take out of us the poisons, as Buddhism calls them, the three poisons that lead to such harmful is not a strong enough word, such, harrowing suffering that we create, have been creating seemingly a long time. And it's a paradox, really. So I was just discussing this recently with a friend who's a very knowledgeable guy about, we think of culture as kind of sort of a, broadly speaking, sort of a good thing, that somehow we might think civilization, in quotes, inhibits our sort of, the old idea anyway, in philosophy has been, and history, philosophy of cultures and history of cultures, that somehow civilization is a, quote, civilizing force that sort of restrains our wild and more destructive impulses. But actually, the new way of thinking about it is that it's actually the exact opposite, that civilization has institutionalized the three poisons of Buddhism, which are greed and desire, first one, aversion and hatred, aggression, second one, and delusion, ignorance, misunderstanding, the third one. Misunderstanding on different levels. Most fundamental one of which is not understanding our total sort of a inescapable interconnectedness. And so anything that pits sort of one person against another, one group against another, one nation against another, is sort of intrinsically misguided from the start, misunderstanding reality. And in some views, the sort of definition of intelligence is being able to see things as they are. So to the extent that we're unable to see things as they are, that we create misunderstandings, which we do, and our minds just do that a lot, and then our cultures do it a lot and reinforce it a lot. The extent we're doing that, I mean, you can look at it in many ways, but one of them is that we're just not being as intelligent as we could be. I always wonder how intelligent it is for a species to call itself wise. That's what we've done. Homo sapiens sapiens. We say we're doubly wise. And it seems to me like to call ourselves wise is not a very wise thing to do. Because, I mean, what standard have we got other than our own sort of thing? How do we know what really is wise, So we come to a practice like this, where we sit still, basically. We reflect on some of the sort of little nuggets of wisdom that the tradition has produced, that Buddhism has produced, and Taoism and other influences, and sometimes other traditions. We kind of see if we can absorb words of wisdom, little nuggets of wisdom, as we sit and as we go about our lives. And basically, the point of it really is, it's from the beginning of Buddhism, it's been stated very clearly. It's to, reduce or even end suffering. The sort of grand project is to end suffering. That's really all it's for, the ending of suffering. Now, framed that way, we might ask, well, why is there this thing called awakening? What's that got to do with, why does the tradition talk about awakening? What's that got to do with suffering? And maybe the answer is, there's some register of our experience, there's some level of our consciousness, there's some kind of dimension of experience that we're not used to touching into or being aware of, but in which actually there isn't suffering. And the more we come to know that, the more it infuses how we live, and can greatly interrupt our tendencies to create harm and suffering for ourselves and for others. That's kind of what's being posited, really, that we can find that there actually is a sort of a level of our being that already knows it's totally connected. It doesn't experience being separate, and it's not delusional. It's sort of unquestionably, actually, when we encounter it, we just know that this is not false. It's truer. It makes our ordinary way of experiencing things seem a little bit like a sort of fantasy. Now we're getting down to the bedrock of reality. We feel that. And and it has everything to do with the project of ending suffering. At least, let's say, reducing suffering, Okay, so now among all these sort of ways and means that we've got at our disposal to help us as we're doing nothing but sitting still, so we sit still, but actually it's not quite all we do. We have got little, we sit still, but we've got little things that can help us in our stillness to just encourage little flickers of new ways of seeing things, new ways of experiencing this moment, and new ways of just even just a little bit sort of detoxifying, little bit of a sort of release of one little droplet of poison out of the system, so to speak, of those three poisons. It just happens by itself through stillness, through being in this context. And so among the various sort of things we do to aid in the process is just reflecting on, taking in these koans, koans being little strange nuggets, often of dialogue, little bits of dialogue that don't really make sense, spoken by these adepts long ago, but which actually, weirdly, they can do something to our minds, to our experience of this moment. Not really through our own efforts. They do it in their own way, and we don't have to try to engineer anything. We just listen to a koan, and actually we don't have to do anything with it. We just, to some extent, absorb it to whatever extent it wants to be absorbed, and don't think about it. Don't worry about it in any way. Just don't really don't have to think about it at all. If you find you're thinking about it, no problem, but you don't need to. You just sort of let it wash through like a cloud coming over, cast a little shadow, and on it goes. It's just like that. And maybe out of that cloud comes a few sprinkles of rain. And maybe there's some, parched little seedlings in there that get nourished by that. Or maybe there's just a little bit of cool relief on a hot day from that cloud, and that's it. Nice. So it's very simple. We're not demanding anything of the koan. We're not demanding anything of ourselves. We just let it float through. Okay, so here's a koan. Okay, here it is. Here it's coming. Just sitting still. Just enjoy the shade as it comes over. Or maybe you're thinking like a hot air balloon is floating by, and you're going to hear a little bit of that hiss, the sort of roaring hiss of its gas. You know what I mean? They're quite loud when you're on a still day, quiet day, a hot air balloon. And there's maybe some of you, I've had this experience of sitting out in the yard or something, and then suddenly hear this, this sort of dragon's kind of gasp. And I think, what on earth is that? And I look around and it comes again, and whoa, there's a great yellow and red balloon floating by. And it was the guy in the basket or the woman in the basket doing the fire, and it floats by. So here it is. Once a student asked Joe of Koyo, he asked this teacher, Joe of Koyo, Joe who lived in Koyo. This is what the student asked. Okay. Daitsu Chisho Buddha sat in the meditation hall for 10 kalpas, but he didn't attain awakening. He didn't awaken. Why was this? Joe, the teacher, replied, "Your question is reasonable indeed." I'm just going to repeat that. The student asks, there's this legendary figure called Daitsu Chisho who sat in meditation for 10 kalpas. Okay, a little bit of terminology here. A kalpa is an eon in ancient India, a long sort of age. Actually, one of the metaphors or one of the analogies to explain how long a kalpa is a cubic mile filled like a tank, a cubic mile in dimensions filled with bird seeds. And once every 100 years, a finch flies in and eats one bird seed, one seed from this tank. There's a cubic mile. So the length of time it would take to empty the tank, that is a kalpa. And actually, we had a physicist who came to Mountain Cloud quite regularly for a while when he was at a university in the States, Hart McGrota, who calculated once just in his mind when he should have been doing his, hardcore sitting or something, he calculated in his mind that if the tank was a cubic kilometer, so not mile, cubic kilometer, he said it would be, I'm sorry, I can't actually remember that. Maybe like something like a, I just remember he said it was basically one kalpa was 14 times older than the universe. So if the universe is 13 billion years, whatever that must have been, like 150 billion years or something, one kalpa. So for 10 of those kalpas, this guy sat. Maybe somebody actually I noticed on Instagram today, they announced that I was going to be talking about this koan tonight. And this little story was in there. Somebody just put, that's relatable. In other words, sitting a long time, and not that much happening, maybe, So he sits all this time, kind of no great shift. And the student, maybe he's kind of nervous or something, might happen to him. And he asks the teacher, why did it happen like that? And the teacher says, that's a very good question. And the thing is, the first thing that I want to try to convey in this strange koan, because it actually goes on a little bit more. The first thing that I really want to try to convey is, what if the teacher is in fact really answering the question? Student asks, so this guy sat all these kalpas and sort of, didn't awaken. Why? Answer, that's a very reasonable question. Now you think, well, how could that be an answer? It's not an answer. It's just an affirmation of the question. But wait a minute. What it really is a matter of sort of, what does this mean, awakening? I mean, what if we put it like this, we're used to living with all this sort of mental activity kind of telling us about the way things are. It tells us that it's just thoughts, it's just thoughts. And of course, there's feelings that come up too. And the thoughts and the feelings often fuel each other, actually, in quite interesting ways. But thoughts and feelings and thoughts, they're coming up. And they say, the first thing, one primary sort of, assumption or something, thing they tell us, conviction that they generate in us, is that, I clearly exist as a me who has certain characteristics, certain history, memories, hopes, dreams, fears, problems, pains, traumas, and relationships that I've had, or I still have, some that don't, not so much, and so on. I've got all this, and and I'm kind of inhabiting this body, and I'm kind of separate from everything that's outside the body. I move through the world like a little sort of driver in the body or something. You see what I mean? Like a sort of a robot master inside the body, kind of making it do what it does, having all these thoughts, perceiving the world through the senses, or I'm the recipient of the sense experience and the agent, at least to some extent, of the actions, And so we get that idea. And to awaken, whatever other things it might be, is nearly always framed as some kind of maybe shocking or just maybe easy, but whatever, but it's some kind of liberation from the sense of being me. There's something about this me that isn't wholly exactly right. It's not exactly true. It's not a complete story of what's going on. There is, in fact, another way or other ways of experiencing this very moment where there really isn't a little person inside with a thread of a narrative, my past, my future, sort of running through this moment. What if that just isn't here? Imagine if there just isn't anything but now. What happens to my normal sense of me if there's only now? What if it were enough? What if it were actually not necessary to be sort of constructing a sense of past and future, which is actually what we do, and constructing a sense of the one who has the past and will have the future? What if instead we just disengage from that and all there is now? In other words, what if, in a certain sense, we stop thinking? I mean, if we think about it at all, and hopefully we, in a way, we sort of don't think about it at all, about anything like awakening, if we just put that out of mind, and that's just another piece in the mental sort of jungle. I don't know, there's the mental junkyard of our minds, you know. What if that's just another piece in the attic where we put everything that we sort of, no, that's not a great analogy. Just another piece in the ticker tape running through the mind of mental activity. Somewhere in there, there's this, especially if we're sitting and we know about meditation practice, we know about awakening, we heard Buddhism, the word itself is something to do with awakening, Buddha, wake up, awakened, or and we sort of got some idea you're supposed to sit, supposed to practice, and maybe this thing, you know, you'll do this thing will happen, you'll get this thing, or you'll attain this thing called awakening or something. Forget all that. That's just future, really. What if there's just now? So then, if there's just now, and you look at this question of the monk, see, the question's implicit with this notion of something else needs to happen. Why didn't this guy wake up? He sat all that time. And that's even assuming the guy was sitting in order to do something other than sit there, in order to have something happen. So the student's assuming that, and the student's sort of something other than this needs to be arising, right? And so actually the student's just asking a question. That's what's happening. And the teacher says, very interesting, reasonable question. Because this is it already. I think it's rather a beautiful answer, I feel. Anyway, the student's not sort of satisfied, because he then says, but he sat in meditation. Why did he not attain Buddhahood? Why did he not awaken? And then the teacher gives another answer. He says, well, he is a non-attained Buddha. He is a non-attained Buddha. She is a non-attained Buddha. So this phrase, a non-attained Buddha, is it's sort of comes up through the Zen kind of annals now and then, the non-attained Buddha. I think it's very beautiful, actually, that in various different ways. It reminds me right off the bat that the book that this comes from, this collection, The Gateless Gate, it's kind of the same thing. The gateless gate, the no gate gate. There's no gate. There's no getting through anything. It's just one fact, one now, one. How could anything go through anything? No gate, no gate. And yet there's some kind of, maybe there's some kind of sort of, seems like there's some need to sort of realize that, So there is a gate. There's no gate, but we need to realize there's no gate. So there's kind of a gate. So it's the gateless gate. Here we got, well, there's Buddha. What does that mean? It means this state we can sort of somehow find where there's deep joy and peace and love already. So they're already here. This Buddha thing, this awakening thing, it's always already here. It's not something we make. It's not something we attain, because it's already here. It's already fully here. So there's nothing to attain, because it's already here. The only thing that there sort of is, there's a sort of like attaining, I suppose, in a sense, is letting go of our basically mental habits and of course emotion habits as well, that entrance us from this point of view, so that we don't see that, so we don't experience it. So so when we sit, we're not attaining a single solitary thing. We don't forget that, put that out of mind. We're just releasing. We are releasing. We're letting things more and more actually be the way they are. So we're releasing, above all, we're releasing our oppositions to the way things are, our resistance, our aversion. That's the second poison, actually, to the way things are. We're resisting, we're releasing our grasping after having things be some other way. That would be first poison, desire. We're releasing that. And so what the whole point really is, that what then becomes clear when desire and clinging, reaching, grasping after things, when that's absent, what's it like? And we're not contracted in desire of whatever kind. We're just okay. It's okay now, just as it is. We're in sitting in these gatherings and in our sittings alone as well. We get this opportunity to just, put all that on the shelf, leave it at the door just for a little bit. So right now, releasing, just letting, there's no need for things to be different. So just putting that impulse and habit, feeling driven, as Rick Hansen put it a few weeks ago, being driven, compelled to want things this way, that way, whatever. Just we let that go. What's it like when there's no need for things to be different? What's it like when there's nothing missing, nothing lacking? I mean, I'm not saying hypothetically, I mean, right now, what's it like if there's nothing missing? Okay. And what's it like if there's nothing that I don't want to be arising, if everything's welcome? So what's it like if there's nothing missing? What's it like if everything's welcome? If it's all somehow, for now, just now, okay. How is it in the body? If there's no desire right now, how is it in the body if there's no aversion or resistance just now? Feel that. Feel that. Let yourself kind of dissolve into it. Because then what can happen, is that this third poison of kind of misunderstanding or misperceiving, that can also go. And we just see more clearly this moment, just as it is somehow rich. It has a richness to it, a fullness. Maybe we get a sense of a wholeness to it. That somehow it's one whole. Yeah, there's pieces, elements, lots of them, but at the same time, there's some way in which, in spite of all the many elements, something makes it one whole. One whole. And we didn't get there by attaining at all. We come to taste it, experience it, feel it, know it, love it, really. I mean, appreciate it. Okay, it gets fuller and richer through releasing, through letting go. It's that simple. So the whole notion of sort of getting something called awakening or something is very tricky, because all we're really doing is releasing, letting be, letting go. Very, very easy. And, maybe even now, again, maybe now we revisit that question and answer. Why did this poor guy sad all that time? Why didn't he awaken? Well, wait a minute. That question's already bringing in some little edge of desire or something, isn't it? So we'll just let that release. And be like Teacher Joe or whatever, who says, your question is reasonable indeed. Oh, so beautiful, no? He's just sort of presenting whatever this poor student is wrapped up thinking about, just presenting here, now, this. It's all here, all here. And then, hold on, master, why didn't he did all that sitting? Why didn't it sort of work? So, well, okay, non-attained Buddha. You're a Buddha. You're totally Buddha. You're here. You are. be non-attained Buddha. Still Buddha. Attainment or non-attainment is still nothing to do with it. Okay. Yeah, I think probably there's sort of I'm sure there's a lot more, or maybe just less to be said about this. But I hope that's some kind of something helpful, because I don't want to, I mean, my only hope is to sort of use, in a sense, use the koan in a way that helps you all, in some way with your what? I don't know what, actually. But somehow it's, I hope, a little bit enjoyable. I mean, because there's nothing, these are just ripples in the great ocean. That's all we got, really. How lovely, how lovely, how lovely. And these koans they somehow have the capacity to help us join the ripples of the ocean with much more ease, and sort of know that this ripple is part of the ocean. So, and it's right here. It's right here. The ocean is right here. Okay. Again, I'm going to stop now, but I want to invite any questions. If anybody has yeah, I think probably best to say questions. I mean, I suppose it could be a comment too, if somebody has a comment. And either with a hand raise, which you do from the reactions little tab at the bottom, or in the chat, I will endeavor to respond to anything. I don't know that I'll do it with the grace of this guy, Joe of Koyo. But in fact, I know I won't, but I'll do what I can. If anybody's got anything that's bubbling up, it's fine if not. Okay. Andrew, go ahead. I think you can unmute.
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
Since I got the theme that aversion was kind of a key in this koan, averse to the condition of sitting for 10,000 billion years, whatever that added up to. What came up for me was, yes, there's some sense of I can accept certain outcomes and let go of some aversion. The heart really, really doesn't want tragedy, deep misfortune, deep pain. And I feel a very deep aversion to those things. So much so I almost want to call it innate aversion. And I don't know if that's a mistaken perception, but I'm curious what your response is to working with aversion to that deep, tragic dimension of life.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, I think it's good to get this sort of clear. What seems to happen through practice, I mean, ideally anyway, is that it touches the heart more and more. The more that we can come to see that we're not as separate as we thought, that means we're more intimate with more. We feel more part of this world. We feel we belong, and that we're engaged in and committed to and care about this world and all its beings more and more. And therefore, actually, suffering becomes sort of more painful. I mean, seeing the suffering in the world becomes something more and more through practice. We want to do what we can all we can to alleviate where we can. So actually, somehow though, it's not quite being activated by or motivated by simply aversion as before. It's really more, it seems to be more about compassion and the same thing with, with our own suffering and suffering of those near to us, is that it's yeah, I guess you could say there's aversion to it in a sense, because we definitely would far rather not be seeing and feeling the suffering in this world and not having it arise to the extent it does. But the real response to it seems to be more and more compassion, a compassionate wish to act to alleviate it. And somehow I don't know that I don't feel it's exactly the same as just saying I'm averse to it. It's somehow it seems to me it's a different. It maybe looks sort of similar, but it's coming out of a different place. The heart of, the one way it's framed sometimes is that, when the bodhisattva, the being who cares for other beings and for the awakening of other beings, is one way that's viewed is not is kind of they're driven by, not by the three poisons, but by compassion, love, wisdom, discernment. Yeah. So that's something to reflect. I'm sure you could get better answers from other greater teachers, but that's something to sort of maybe reflect on a bit. Okay, thank you for that. Deborah, I'm going to ask. Okay, hi there.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
So, who is this person who sat for all those kalpas? What's his name, and does he tell me something about him?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Thanks for bringing that up. I would have done, I just somehow skipped over it, but I'm very glad you've asked. Okay, he's called Daitsu Chisho, and his name actually is quite interesting. It means, Daitsu means, I'm quoting from Yamada Koan Roshi in his book. He says, Daitsu Chisho Daitsu means being able to go to all places or go through anything. In other words, pervading the whole universe. So that's Daitsu, pervading the whole universe. Chisho means wonderful wisdom. So Daitsu Chisho means wonderful wisdom pervading the whole universe. Now, it gets even a little more interesting. So basically, that's actually, so it seems to be like a perfect description already, of whatever awakening might mean. There's some, whatever it is that isn't bound by space or time or pervades everything and is omnipresent everywhere, whatever that might be. And that's his name. So there it is, already pervading the whole universe. So that's something but it gets even stranger. It's he's part of a kind of legend in which actually he and his wife had 16 sons. Now, I'm just going to check I get this right. It comes from the Lotus Sutra, right? Which is this great sutra from Mahayana Buddhism. It's a story in the Lotus Sutra. So he was a king of a certain country and had 16 sons. When at a certain point he became a priest. When he experienced complete enlightenment, okay, well, this is the legend, as he's saying. He began to preach the Dharma in a mountain area. Upon hearing their father's preaching, all 16 sons also entered the priesthood. This group constituted the foundation of present-day Buddhism. Each of the 16 sons eventually became a Buddha, the youngest being Shakyamuni Buddha. So that's, Shakyamuni Buddha is sort of the Buddha. So he's the 16th son, according to this legend, of all-pervading wisdom, marvelous wisdom pervading the universe, Daitsu Chisho. So that's the legend. So how you square this, in other words, whoa, there's Shakyamuni Buddha is the 16th son. He's the 16th of 16 Buddhas who are all sons of this other Buddha. I don't know how you stack this all up, but somehow that's what we got. So thanks for asking, Deborah. I'm going to just take a quick look at the chat. Actually, I see something here. What might be the relationship between a bodhisattva and a non-attained Buddha? And then, is there another way to say non-attained Buddha? Is another way to say non-attained Buddha non-Buddha Buddha? yeah, I think so. Non-Buddha Buddha. Maybe that's what we all are. Maybe that's exactly what we all are. Non-Buddha Buddha. Because, the lovely thing about the non-attained Buddha and the non-Buddha Buddha is you don't need to be, there's no standard you're being held up to. Of course we want to be kinder and wiser and happier, but it's not like a standard. It's not like cross this line in happiness, cross this line in wisdom, cross this line in kindness, and then you become something different. No, we're already being, we're part of this whole thing already, just as we are. There's no more is needed. Except that we work to make this strange, marvelous, terrible dream of this world happier the best we can. But there's no we don't have to measure up in that sense. The practice is conveying what already loves us as we are. Do you see what I mean? The practice is trying to convey that we're already sort of, I want to say marvels. I don't want to sound, maybe that sounds too much, but it isn't really. Each of us is already sort of, a beloved marvel, but we just don't know it. Another story in the Lotus Sutra is about the child who doesn't realize that they're the child of some queen, and they're wandering among the poor, and they're destitute, and they're offered a job in the pigsty, and then basically it's a little bit like the prodigal son story, but in this case they work their way up, because they start in the pigsty, then they get in the dairy shed, and then they're out in the fields, and then they're allowed in the kitchen, and then they get to be the butler, and then finally the parents of the household reveal that this is actually, you're our own daughter, you're our own son, and it would have been overwhelming to them to hear it at first. So they have to sort of work their way. They have to have the truth broken to them slowly. That's again like this practice, that each of us in our flawed and ailing and deluded ways, gradually letting in more this, non-attained Buddhahood, letting it in more, the non-proven, non-earned, non-deserved, non-attained Buddhahood is we already are that and have that and are part of it. And so we're just gradually kind of letting it in more. Okay, I think there are many teachers who say, since we're already awake, there's no need to meditate. In fact, meditation creates the... Yeah, I know this one. I remember reading Dogen ask this question about practice. Did he find an answer? Yeah, people say... I know there are some teachers who actually sort of remonstrate against people who meditate. I mean, I think it's a bit ridiculous. I don't... It's true. It's true that we already basically are all. So we don't actually, in a sense it's true, but damn, we're non-attained Buddhas. We got to have some help. We need some practice. All of us need help. I mean, find it whatever way works for you. For many, this meditation thing is a real help. For many, it's not enough. Need ancillary help as well, or other main kinds of help, therapy, etc. But the fact is, we do need help. I mean, I think the vast majority of us do need help. Let's receive it. Let's take it in. Be grateful. Thank you. Okay, we'll stop there. Thank you so much. I know there's more. I'll have to look another time, but I think it's time for us to end. Thank you very much, everybody who asked questions, and thank you very much for being here, sitting together. I hope you've had an enjoyable evening so far. Okay, Peg, over to you.